Welcome to So What's It Actually About? I'm your host, Margie McKechnie, and I, along with my wide array of guests, hope to help you better understand and weather the wonderful world of actuarial science.
Hello, and welcome to today's episode. Today we are joined by Sue. Thank you so much for joining us, Sue.
It's an absolute pleasure.
Standard question for any podcast. Tell me about yourself, the position that you are currently holding, and anything else you want to add to that initial picture of yourself.
Okay, so I was born in England, but moved to South Africa when I was 3 months old. So I've grown up here, but apparently some people can still hear it in my accent. You don't feel so. I studied at Wits University, and then probably very unusually for these days, I've spent my entire working career working for Hannover.
Sure.
I'm coming up to a fairly significant anniversary the next year or so. It's been a while. I grew up in the corporate actuarial team on the life side.
Okay.
And so started working there, eventually took over that team. When the company decided to set up the risk management function, I took on the position of chief risk officer. And over time, I've added additional responsibilities. So I take some of the head of actuarial function responsibilities as well as the data protection officer.
Sure.
And I am a single mom with 2 teenage kids. Yes, pretty much. Yes. Yeah, with also 2 dogs, 4 cats, 1 hamster, 3 mantises, and 5 snails.
Oh, good grief. Wow, that's an array of things. So, there's a lot there for us to unpack. Before we get into sort of your career side of it, let's backtrack to where you made the decision to study actuarial science and what was your sort of decision-making process there, and why actuarial science? Were there other options? And how did you find that experience of actually having studied actuarial science?
Okay. Well, I must say, when I was in high school, if you were good at maths, you were kind of told you're either going to do accountancy or actuarial science or become an academic. There 3 A's.
You know, 3 A's.
I knew I wasn't really cut out to be an academic. And between accounting and actuarial science sounded a little more challenging. I was already up for a challenge at that point. And that's what I signed up. And I didn't really know what to expect.
Okay.
I went into it very much with eyes closed. I have to say I enjoyed the maths and the actuarial science components and the early part of the stats. Not so much of a fan of time series, multivariate statistics, the hardcore stats. I think I prefer the things that I can more easily link to real life situations. And I realized all those things have applications.
But wasn't immediately obvious when you engage with them.
Exactly, yes.
Okay.
I did have to try to change my course after our week 2 statistics tutorial. At that stage, this was legendary for having this killer tutorial to scare off people.
Sounds fun, right?
And it was just a little bit too late for me to switch to computer science, and so I had to stick it out, and actually I ended up really enjoying it.
Sure.
Overall, I'd have to say I love the work. I love the scope to get involved in so many different things. I didn't particularly enjoy the exam process. I took a very long time to qualify. I started on this journey when I was 17 and qualified when I was 34, so sure, literally half your life with perfect. But yes, that's how I ended up. I always stumbled into the career and then haven't looked back.
Sure. And tell me, you said obviously you struggled a bit with the exams. Was there a particular exam that you struggled with? Or was it just the later exams or a certain set of exams? What was it?
Yes, it was the later exams. I think the earlier, more technical ones I got through quite quickly, and I think the university prepared us very well for those as well. I think I struggled when it came to the later ones, partly because my exam technique was not great.
Yeah.
So I missed out on a lot of easy marks by not stating the obvious things.
Yes. So you dove into the sort of higher order points when it's like, actually just state what you are talking about.
Yes, it took me a long time to get that right. And then what at that stage was the investment subject.
Yes.
Just foxed me. That took, I don't know, 10 or 11 attempts.
Sure.
It took a very long time. I don't know what it is, what didn't click. Maybe it's because I have the whole thing that with economics, there is no answer to the equation. It's always it depends. And I prefer having clarity and a clear outcome.
Got you.
But I did eventually, I persisted, I got through it. Fellowship also, I wrote the Life Fellowship many, many, many times.
Okay.
Moved into a new role, had basically given up the exams. I'm moving into an area where I need to have short-term perspective. Let me just study the material, and then since I've studied it, let me write the exam, and I passed. But first time.
Oh, good grief.
Okay, that's very interesting. It does make me think sometimes that having real-life experiences are hindrance of exams.
But then I feel like actually in real life, this is not how it plays out. Just stuck to the content for that one. Very interesting. And so you are working at Hannover, which is a reinsurance company.
That's good.
And I think reinsurance, especially for students, seems like a very removed actuarial function because it's not something that your average person engages with, right? So could you talk to the role of reinsurance and sort of your actuarial functions within that kind of framework?
Okay. So if I had to explain reinsurance in the simplest possible terms, in the same way that insurance exists to pool the risk of a whole group of policyholders, so everyone pays a predictable monthly premium instead of having the occasional unexpected large loss, we fulfill the same function for insurance companies. So we take on the risk, pool the risks of various insurance companies, and then everyone's paying a small amount to the reinsurer every month and hopefully not having that massive loss. So that's a gross oversimplification.
But it's the pooling, but now on a entity level as opposed to a policyholder level.
Exactly, yes.
Okay.
And if when you study actuarial science, you'll come across the standard reasons for having reinsurance. It's going to be your capacity, it's reducing income statement volatility.
Yes.
Some advantageous pricing, because reinsurers, for example, can benefit from diversification and they pass that benefit on in pricing. Where I think less emphasis is placed, and actually is one of the key value adds from a reinsurance perspective, is around the services side.
Yes, like the expertise.
Yes. So, for example, we have on both our life and our non-life segments, we have pricing teams who then look at analyzing claims experience in various ways from a number of clients across the market, as well as industry data they can get hold of.
Yes.
And can then give feedback to a particular company saying, this is what we're seeing in terms of your experience. This is what we're seeing in terms of market experience. And where are the differentiators? What's driving that?
Yes.
So they have access to a much wider pool and teams that can be dedicated to do that and to provide that feedback. Risk management, this is what reinsurers do. Entire businesses about risk management can provide risk management input, capital management as well. And another big thing is access to new or different products, markets, business partners. So you might have an idea for a product you want to launch in the South African insurance market. We can probably have a look and say, with our global footprint, oh, we've seen this in such and such a market. This is what worked. This is what didn't. So learn from what we've seen elsewhere in the world. You don't have to make the same mistakes over and again. You can learn how best to target, how best to price, how best to risk manage. And then also quite a lot of research. So yes, emerging risk is a huge thing for us because those emerging risks are going to hit us big time down the road, whether it's 2 years, 5 years, 10 years. And that research, again, can be shared with our clients, how to manage that, how to steer your portfolio as we move towards the horizon where those risks actually turn up on our doorstep. So for me, reinsurance, the financial side, the capacity side is really only the very first building block. There's so much more to it. Yes. And getting into a partnership with a good reinsurance partner can provide you with so much access to so much more expertise and experience that can then be used to the benefit of your organization.
I think there's a number of things that you said there that I'd like to just unpack a little bit. I think one of the first things you said there was to do with engaging with data from a variety of different entities. And you've also spoken to you obviously being in the data protection space. How important is that? You must be dealing with much more data than an insurer does because you're engaging with a variety of insurers. So how did you go about in that role protecting data?
It is a very, very important area. And it's an interesting balancing act because I think we live more and more in this data-driven world. Data analytics is more and more a competitive advantage. Data has massive value, and that's why ransomware attacks and so on are so prevalent because people will pay a huge amount of money for the data they've got not to be released.
Yeah.
And we've seen quite a few examples in the local market, that has SIPC breach being the most recent one, directors' information being circulated. Quite scary to think about the implications of that. The balancing act we have is that actuaries, data is in our DNA. We always want more. We never want to let go of it. Deleting data is good. Things don't happen with the public, generally, the more aware they become of what can be done with data, the less they want to give.
Exactly.
They want to give you the absolute minimum that you need to do your job and nothing more than that.
Yeah.
And I think there's also a fear of a almost anti-selective behavior by the insurance company if they have too much data about you.
Yes.
The risk pooling concept falls away.
Yeah.
If they start being able to really, really individually risk profile. And the idea is you're meant to aggregate across pool.
Yeah.
So it's finding that balance where you get as much data as necessary, but as little as possible.
Yeah.
And for me, the golden bullet in this whole area is depersonalization.
Yes.
So you collect the information, you do what you need to do with it, and then to make all the actuaries happy, you keep the data, but you remove all the identifying characteristics. You do not need to know that it's a 45-year-old female Susan Atkinson. You just need to know it's a 45-year-old female you don't need to be able to link it to the individual.
Yes.
And then you can do what you like with that data as long as it cannot in any way be linked back to me. And I think what's really important here is not, as an insurance company, the financial risk. The financial risk is, it's there. If you have to pay ransomware attacks, you have to pay fines, information regulation comes, that is the least of your problems. It's the reputational impact.
Yeah.
Who wants to go and do business with a company who let your data be set out on the internet for anyone and everyone to see? Yeah. You mentioned reinsurers steal a lot more data. So yes, volume-wise, because we sit on the data from all our clients, much more so on the life and health side than property and casualty, I must say, although we still have the fair amount there. But the type of data is different. So, for example, we wouldn't have any information about banking details of our clients because we don't have the policy.
Because you don't engage with them, right?
Yes, yeah. We just get one bulk payment from the insurance company.
Gotcha.
But we have a lot of the information around medical conditions, family history, financial position for financial underwriting. It was all sensitive. It's special personal information in terms of the POBI Act.
Yes.
So we do sit on huge volumes of that. So it is an area that we give a great deal of attention to. We're also part of the European organization, which means we're also subject to GDPR.
Yes.
Fortunately, GDPR and POPI are quite similar.
Okay.
But then it also gets a little bit tricky because POPI applies to any data processed within South Africa, regardless of where it comes from.
Okay.
Okay. GDPR applies to the data of EU citizens anywhere in the world.
Oh, goodness. So there's like two layers that you're having to adhere to.
Yes. And we don't always know. So, for example, I have dual citizenships. Dual citizenship. So if, as an insurance company, you had me, you would see me as a South African citizen because that's the information you have.
Yes.
I'm actually also a UK citizen, which until recently would have meant I was an EU citizen.
Yes.
And so I would have been subject to GDPR as well. Post-Brexit, that's not as much of an issue, but we have plenty of other European citizens in South Africa who have dual nationality, and you don't actually know whether you have to be compliant with GDPR as well. So we literally tried to say, let's try and set our bar that we meet them both in all areas.
Which is quite a hurdle.
It is quite a hurdle.
But does create that element of assurance that data is being protected. And I think, as you said, as more and more data is being collected and the ability to use that data is improving, it's that much more important.
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
And I think the other mindset that is having to change is, I think there were, in the glory days 20 years ago, where you'd collect every single piece of information about policyholder in case it was useful.
Yes.
So maybe you didn't use whether a vehicle was manual or automatic as a rating factor, but you collected it in case it was significant. You can't do that anymore. If you don't need the information for rating purposes, you can't collect it.
So sure,
without the explicit consent of the policyholder.
Which is quite interesting from like a risk perspective. If you're trying to introduce a new rating factor, etc., it's like if you don't have that data, you're not actually 100% sure.
Yes. So you almost have to introduce it as a rating factor, collect the information, and then calibrate later.
Exactly.
Which can be quite risky.
Yeah, exactly. And so you've spoken through Hannover being an insurer for insurance companies. You've also spoken to there being like a European branch of that. Just speak to sort of like the multinational nature of reinsurers and why that's necessary. Because I think sometimes students see like Swiss Re or Hannover Re or whatever, and they just think that it's in South Africa. But I think also talk to the actual mechanism of why it's international.
Yes, absolutely. So maybe one thing I didn't mention earlier, we talked about reinsurance. We also have this concept of retrocession.
Yes.
The same thing, another level up. So reinsurance is insurance for insurance. Retrocession is reinsurance for reinsurance. Beyond that, it just stays as retrocession.
Yeah, exactly. That's what happened.
It can start getting quite complicated with the naming otherwise. But yes, reinsurance absolutely has to be a global business. Otherwise, it doesn't work. And this is particularly true on the short-term side, where we're dealing with a lot of natural and man-made catastrophe exposures.
Yes.
Because the whole business model is built on diversification.
Yes.
So the assumption is that while you might have hurricanes in Florida and wildfires in Australia and floods in the UK, you're probably not going to have them all at exactly the same time. So one year it might be worse in one area and better in another, but over time it sort of evens out.
Yeah.
That diversification is critical. We wouldn't be able to write all the risks we do in South Africa if we didn't know that we're able to pass that on to our parent company in Germany, and they then spread that around the global group.
Yes.
Because something like the KwaZulu-Natal floods, which we experienced recently, would have wiped out our entire balance sheet if we hadn't had that retrocession protection.
Gosh.
And in the same way, when there are hurricanes in Florida and they're quite severe, we pay a little bit towards that.
Yeah.
When there are wildfires in Australia,